The counting of ghosts began in silence. Prefect Julius Valerius stood on the command deck of the Vigil, a ship sworn to patrol forgotten borders. Below him, the gas giant Amaranth whispered its slow, eternal storm. His reflection in the observation dome was a tired man in a crisp uniform. The stakes were simple: hold this system, maintain the peace, and keep the scavengers from picking the bones of a dead civilization. But a low, resonant hum had begun to permeate the sector, a ghost note from an impossible instrument. It was a frequency the Vigil's fleet-mind Lyceum could not isolate, yet it resonated in the ship's very frame. Lyceum's synthesized voice was calm, a stark contrast to the unease it delivered. Prefect, the signal's origin remains shielded. It emanates from the Anchorage, yet all arrays appear dormant. The Anchorage was a colossal ring of obsidian alloy, a pre-diaspora artifact of unknown purpose. For centuries it had orbited Amaranth inert and silent. Now it was singing a song no one could understand, a hymn from a time when humanity walked a different path. Valerius watched the spectral analysis on his command throne's display, the sine wave a perfect, unwavering line. He felt the weight of his office settle upon him. His duty was to the Concordance, the sprawling bureaucratic government that prized stability above all else. A genuine first contact anomaly would bring fleets and inquisitors. It would shatter the quiet equilibrium he had fought so hard to maintain. A sigil, a faint geometric pattern of light, sometimes ghosted across the Anchorage's surface in time with the hum. It was a lock waiting for a key. The past was a key forged in numbers. Keep scanning. Valerius ordered, his voice steady. Focus on gravimetric distortions, something that old doesn't just wake up without leaving a footprint. His second-in-command, Sub-Prefect Anya Sharma, approached, her face etched with professional concern. She held a datapad showing the influx of unauthorized arrivals. "Scrappers and cultists, sir," she reported. "The hum is drawing them in like moths to a dead star. The children of the Void Father believe it's a summons." Valerius felt a familiar throb of frustration behind his eyes. He despised the cult's zealots who chased after any echo of humanity's mythical past. They saw gods in dormant technology and prophets in garbled data streams. Yet their presence complicated everything. The Concordance Charter was clear: freedom of belief was absolute so long as it did not threaten public order. Firing on unarmed pilgrim ships was not an option. Lyceum's icon shimmered beside the main view screen. "Prefect, their numbers are increasing. Their combined engine signatures are masking our finer scans of the artifact." A civilian freighter captain hailed them, her voice a crackle of static and desperation. "Vigil, this is the freighter Stardust Drifter. My family is aboard. The children are blocking the jump point. They say the saint has awakened, and only the worthy may remain." Valerius's jaw tightened. The situation was escalating faster than he had anticipated. He had to protect the civilians, deter the cultists, and solve the mystery of the Anchorage before a real fleet arrived. Its voice was a mirror to the soul. "Lyceum, open a channel to the cultist fleet," Valerius commanded. General broadcast. No encryption. He stood, his posture radiating an authority he didn't entirely feel. The view screen resolved into the face of a man with fever-bright eyes and a shaved head tattooed with spiraling star charts. This was the Void Father's herald. "Prefect," the herald began, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "You trespass in a holy place. The Anchorage is awakening to greet its children. Turn your warship away from this sacred ground." Valerius kept his tone measured, a calm counterpoint to the herald's fervor. "This is a restricted archaeological zone under Concordance protection. Your presence is unauthorized. Your blockade of a public jump point is illegal. Disperse your fleet and allow civilian traffic to pass, or you will be removed." The herald laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Your laws are meaningless here, Prefect. The saint speaks in a language of faith, not statutes. It will judge us, and it will judge you. The transmission cut out. Anya Sharma moved to his side. Sir, they're not listening to reason. Valerius nodded, his gaze fixed on the silent humming ring. No, he said quietly. They're listening to something else. He felt a strange sense of connection to the ancient object, a feeling he couldn't explain. It wasn't just a piece of technology. It felt like a presence, a mind asleep for millennia. The hum was its breath slow and deep. The sigil was its sleeping eye beginning to stir. A ledger remembers every debt. Lyceum. What's the tactical situation? Valerius asked, turning his mind to the immediate problem. The AI's response was instantaneous, a cascade of data on the main screen. The cultist fleet consists of 73 modified civilian hulls, minimal armament. Their strength is their numbers and their willingness to be martyrs. They have formed a loose cordon around the Anchorage, effectively trapping us and the civilian freighters. Valerius studied the display, his mind racing through possibilities. A direct assault was out of the question. The political and ethical fallout would be catastrophic. He needed a way to defuse the situation without bloodshed. He needed to understand what the Anchorage was. Anya, get our historical archives online. Cross-reference pre-diaspora sigils, anything matching what we've seen on the ring. I want to know what they called this thing. He tapped his comm unit. Engineering report status on the primary drive. I want to know our heat margins if we have to make a fast exit. The deck hummed with quiet efficiency as his crew carried out his orders. But beneath the routine, a current of tension ran deep. They were sitting next to a bomb, and a crowd of fanatics was trying to light the fuse. The hum from the Anchorage seemed to grow louder, more insistent. It felt as if it were trying to communicate, to warn them. Valerius had a sudden, chilling thought. What if the cultists were right? Not about their void father, but about the judgment. What if the Anchorage wasn't a weapon or a machine, but a judge? A teacher's first lesson is patience. Days turned into a tense standoff. Valerius used the vigil to run interference, placing his heavily shielded warship between the most aggressive cultist ships and the trapped civilians. It was a delicate dance, a constant negotiation of vectors and threats. He opened a channel to the freighters, assuring them that he was working on a peaceful resolution. He could hear the fear in their voices, the crying of children in the background. It steeled his resolve. He would not fail them. Anya brought him a steaming mug of synth coffee. Any luck with the archives? He asked, his eyes never leaving the view of the star-dusted obsidian ring. She shook her head. Nothing, sir. The sigil doesn't match any known corporate or military insignia from that era. It's unique. Lyceum is running a deeper analysis, trying to find mathematical constants or stellar alignments hidden in the geometry. So far, it's just a pretty picture. Valerius sighed, the warmth of the mug, a small comfort in the cold void. He felt a strange kinship with the long-dead builders of the Anchorage. They had left behind this immense silent sentinel, a puzzle box, humming with forgotten power. Were they scientists, philosophers, warriors? He looked at the cultists' ships, their hulls painted with crude approximations of the sigil. They saw a god, a promise of salvation. He saw a legacy, a responsibility he was not sure he could bear. A mirror shows only what is there. Lyceum's calm voice cut through the quiet tension of the bridge. Prefect, I have a preliminary result from the deep scan analysis. All eyes turned to the main screen. The hum is not a power source activation. It is a data stream, a very, very slow one. And the sigil is the key to unlocking it. Valerius leaned forward, his fatigue forgotten. A data stream. What kind of data? He asked, his mind racing with the implications. It appears to be a query, Lyceum replied. A repeating question broadcast on a carrier wave of exotic particles. It is not asking for a password or a code. It is asking for a census. Valerius stared at the screen, a slow dawn of understanding breaking over him. A census. A counting. It wants to know who is here, he murmured. It's not just waking up. It's taking stock. The implications were staggering. Anya's eyes were wide. Sir, if it's counting, what happens when it gets an answer? The question hung in the recycled air of the bridge. The cultists believed they were the chosen, the worthy. They would answer with their faith, their zealotry. Valerius knew he had to answer first. He had to show the ancient intelligence that humanity was more than a howling mob of fanatics. He had to represent the concordance with its laws, its ideals, its commitment to reason and order. The ledger's ink is truth. Lyceum, can we answer the query? Valerius asked, his voice tight, with a mixture of hope and dread. Can we give it a census of our own? The AI's icon pulsed gently. The data stream is complex, Prefect. It's not just a matter of sending a number. The query has ethical parameters. It seems to be measuring intent history and adherence to a code, a legal code. Valerius felt a shiver run down his spine. A legal code older than the concordance itself. This was no mere archive. It was a repository of law. A judge. What kind of code? Anya asked, her voice a whisper. The fragments I can translate speak of balance of restitution, Lyceum explained. It uses terms like creditor, debtor, and adjudicator. The framework is economic, but applied to morality. It seems to view actions as transactions, creating debts and credits on a cosmic ledger. Soon. Valerius looked out at the silent ring, its humming presence now imbued with a new and terrible significance. The children of the Void Father were about to present their case to a court beyond their comprehension. And he, Julius Valerius, prefect of the Concordance, was their unwitting legal opponent. He had to prove that his civilization, with all its flaws and compromises, was more creditworthy than the fiery absolute faith of the zealots. The fate of the system, and perhaps more, depended on it. A single count can change the world. The civilian vignettes began to flicker across Valerius's command throne, small windows, into the lives he was sworn to protect. A young girl on the Stardust Drifter was drawing a picture of the vigil, her crayon making the warship look like a friendly, slumbering beast. The captain of a bulk hauler was leading his small crew in a quiet prayer. Not to a Void Father, but to the cold, hard vacuum, hoping it would spare them. A medic on an asteroid prospecting ship was carefully inventorying her dwindling supplies, her face a mask of determined professionalism. These were the people of the Concordance, ordinary, resilient, and caught in the crossfire of history. Valerius knew he could not win a battle of faith. The cultists had an unshakable belief in their own righteousness. But he had something they did not, a record. A history of laws upheld, of contracts honored, of peaceful resolutions sought. He had the vast, intricate, and often frustratingly bureaucratic legal code of the Concordance. It was a testament to a society that tried, however imperfectly, to be just. Lyceum, he said, his decision made. Prepare a data packet. We are going to answer the Anchorage's query. We are going to give it a census of the Concordance. Not just our numbers, but our laws, our entire legal and ethical framework. Show it who we are. He felt a tremor of fear, the fear of a man laying his soul bare before an unknown God. But it was a fear tempered by resolve. He would not let the fanatics define humanity. The teacher asks only for an honest answer. The process was painstaking. Valerius and his crew, guided by Lyceum, worked tirelessly to compile the data packet. They included the Concordance Charter in its entirety with its millions of articles and amendments. They added landmark legal cases, records of diplomatic treaties, and logs of humanitarian missions. They showed their failures too, the miscarriages of justice, the laws that had been overturned, the slow grinding process of a society striving to be better. It was an honest accounting, a ledger of their civilization's soul. As they worked, the hum from the Anchorage grew more intense. The sigil on its surface began to glow with a soft internal light. It was as if the ancient intelligence was aware of their efforts, as if it were listening, waiting. The cultists, too, seemed to sense a change. Their broadcasts became more fervent, their ships inching closer to the obsidian ring, their belief hardening into a certainty that their moment of ascension was at hand. Finally, the data packet was ready. It was a monument of information, a testament to 1,000 years of civilization. Valerius took a deep breath. "Lyceum," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet of the command deck. "Transmit the packet. Let's make our case." He watched as a beam of pure information, invisible to the naked eye, lanced out from the vigil and touched the surface of the Anchorage. For a moment, nothing happened. A mirror reflects the judgment of the self. Then the hum stopped. A profound, system-wide silence descended, broken only by the frantic comms chatter of the cultists. The glowing sigil on the Anchorage flared, expanding, until it covered the entire inner surface of the ring. A new light, cold and analytical, began to shine from the artifact. It was not the warm glow of a welcoming god. It was the stark, impartial light of a courtroom. A new voice spoke not through the comms but directly in their minds. It was ancient, vast, and utterly dispassionate. The voice was a chorus of 1 billion souls, the distilled wisdom of a civilization long gone. It was the voice of the Anchorage, and it was now the judge. The herald of the Void Father screamed in triumph over the open channel. "The saint speaks. It has heard our prayers. We are the chosen." But Valerius felt a cold dread creep into his heart. The light from the Anchorage was not shining on him or on the vigil. It was focused entirely on the fleet of the children of the Void Father. A new set of symbols began to appear on the ring's surface, projected into the void like holographic fire. They were not words. They were numbers, accounts being settled, a ledger being balanced, and the numbers beside the cultists' ships were all in the red. "A debt unpaid is a sentence waiting." The Anchorage spoke again, its mental voice a hammer blow of cold logic. The herald's triumphant cries turned to confused sputtering. "What? What is this? This is not the ascension we were promised." Lyceum's voice was a low murmur in Valerius's ear. "Prefect, the Anchorage is citing violations against its own legal code. A code that seems to have a lot in common with our own, particularly regarding free passage and the protection of non-combatants." Valerius watched, his breath held tight in his chest, as lines of pale blue light extended from the Anchorage towards the cultist fleet. They were not weapons. They were something far more terrifying. They were tractor beams, but they weren't pulling the ships. They were holding them in place gently, but with an unbreakable grip. Then the Anchorage broadcast a second message, this one a simple, universally understood data packet. It was a bill, an itemized invoice for the resources expended to maintain the blockade, for the emotional distress caused to the civilian crews, for the potential damage to a protected historical site. The total was astronomical. The currency was not credits, but energy. Ship's power, life support. The counting is the sentence. The cultists' ships began to flicker. Their lights dimmed, their engines sputtered. The Anchorage was not destroying them. It was simply collecting what it was owed. It was draining their power, rendering them helpless adrift. It was a perfectly logical, perfectly legal, and perfectly terrifying act of self-defense. It was turning their own energy, their own fanaticism back on them. It was a mirror reflecting the consequences of their actions. The herald's voice was a panicked squeal. "What is happening? The saint has betrayed us. Prefect, help us, your laws. You must protect us." The irony was so thick, Valerius could almost taste it. The man who had scorned his laws was now begging for their protection. Valerius felt a grim satisfaction, but it was overshadowed by the awesome, terrifying power of the entity they had awakened. It was a force of pure, unadulterated law. He looked at Anya. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. "Sir," she whispered, "what do we do?" Valerius knew this was the test. Not just for him, but for the Concordance. The Anchorage had shown its nature. It was not a god. It was a court. And now he had to decide what role he would play in its proceedings. He could let the cultists suffer the consequences of their actions. Or he could intervene. He could show the ancient judge that concordance law was not just about punishment, but about mercy. A teacher's hand can be firm but fair. "Lyceum, open a channel to the Anchorage," Valerius said, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. "I wish to file a motion." The AI hesitated for a fraction of a second, an eternity for a being of its speed. "Prefect, on what grounds?" Valerius's gaze was fixed on the disarmed and dying ships of his former adversaries. "On the grounds of clemency," he said, "and on the grounds of concordant sovereignty. The children of the Void Father have broken our laws, and they will be judged by them. But they will be judged in our courts, not by a ghost from the past." He was claiming jurisdiction. It was a bold, perhaps foolish gamble. He was asserting the authority of his own legal system in the face of a power that could drain fleets with a thought. He was betting everything on the hope that the Anchorage, this ancient adjudicator, would respect a legitimate claim from another lawful entity. He was in effect serving it a subpoena. The mental voice of the Anchorage returned, its tone unchanged, still dispassionate, still ancient. The lines of light holding the cultist ships wavered. The power drain lessened. The Anchorage was considering his motion. The silent humming ring was thinking. And in that moment, Julius Valerius felt the true weight of history on his shoulders. A mirror can reflect a better path. Aboard the Stardust Drifter, the little girl who had been drawing the vigil now added a new element to her picture. A vast, glowing ring, its light not angry but watchful. She drew lines connecting the ring to the smaller, messier ships of the cultists, and another line connecting it to the calm, steady shape of the Concordance vessel. In her child's mind, she did not understand the complexities of law or the nuances of jurisdiction. But she understood that the big, quiet ship was protecting everyone. She understood that the prefect was a good man. The captain of the bulk hauler watched the drama unfold on his bridge's main viewer. He had spent his life navigating the hard, unforgiving rules of interstellar commerce. He understood contracts and penalties, profit and loss. He looked at the glowing ring and did not see a god or a monster. He saw an auditor, a powerful, implacable auditor, but one that operated on principles he could on some level comprehend. He saw a system, and he felt a grudging respect. "Well, I'll be," he muttered to his first mate. The old myths were true. There is a final accounting. The medic on the prospecting ship had her hand on a plasma pistol, ready to defend her small crew against any boarding parties. When the light from the Anchorage had first appeared, she had feared the worst. Now she watched as the prefect, a man she had never met, spoke for them all. He spoke of law, of mercy, of their way of life. She lowered her weapon. She felt a surge of pride, a feeling she hadn't known she was missing. They were not alone out here. The concordance was more than just taxes and regulations. It was a promise. And Prefect Valerius was keeping it. A ledger is only closed when the debt is paid. The Anchorage's decision came without warning. The mental voice was as calm as ever, but Valerius felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees. The lines of light from the ring vanished. The cultist ships, now dark and powerless, drifted free. A new data packet was sent from the Anchorage, this time directly to the Vigil. It was the bill. The invoice for services rendered transferred to the Concordance's account. Lyceum's voice was dry. "Prefect, we have just incurred a significant energy debt. The Anchorage has, however, offered a generous repayment plan, and it has opened a permanent file on us. It seems we have a new line of credit." Valerius allowed himself a small, tired smile. He had not only saved the cultists from their own folly, he had established diplomatic relations with a god machine. Anya let out a long, slow breath. "Sir, what just happened?" Valerius looked at the Anchorage, no longer a source of dread, but a silent partner, a guardian. "I think he said we just passed our bar exam." He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the civilian ships. Tell them the blockade is over. Then get me the Herald of the Void Father. He and I need to have a long talk about the Concordance legal system and about paying his bill. Accounting can be a new beginning." The aftermath was a flurry of controlled professional activity. The Vigil's engineering crews prepared to transfer power to the disabled cultist vessels, enough for life support and basic navigation. Medical teams were put on standby. Valerius was firm. This was a rescue operation, not a conquest. He had to demonstrate to the Anchorage and to the galaxy that the Concordance's claim of jurisdiction was not a power grab, but a genuine act of stewardship. He was setting a precedent, and he knew the ancient ring was watching, judging, and taking notes. The Herald, when he finally appeared on screen, was a broken man. His faith had been shattered by cold, irrefutable logic. He looked at Valerius not with hatred, but with a kind of desperate confusion. "What is it?" he whispered. "What is the Anchorage?" Valerius leaned forward, his expression not of a victor, but of a weary teacher. "It's not a god," he said gently. "It's a legacy, a repository of our oldest laws. It doesn't want worship, it wants order. It doesn't demand faith, it demands accountability." He gestured to the star chart, to the vast empty spaces between worlds. "Out here, it's easy to believe that we are alone, that the only laws are the ones we make for ourselves. We were wrong. We've always been living under a higher authority, one that was just asleep." The Herald stared at him, the tattooed stars on his scalp seeming to mock his former beliefs. "What happens to us now?" he asked, his voice small. "Now," Valerius replied, "you face justice. Not the arbitrary judgment of a silent god, but the considered and merciful justice of your fellow man. A teacher's work is never truly done." With the immediate crisis averted, Valerius turned his attention to the larger implications. He had awakened a power that could reshape the balance of the galaxy. The Concordance would want to control it. Other factions would want to destroy it or exploit it. He knew that his report to High Command would be the most important document he ever wrote. He had to frame the discovery of the Anchorage not as a threat, but as an opportunity. A chance for the Concordance to reaffirm its highest ideals. Lyceum had been silently analyzing the data streams from the Anchorage. "Prefect, the AI reported the Anchorage is more than a court. It is also an archive, a library of unimaginable scope. It contains scientific, historical, and philosophical records from the pre-diaspora era. It calls itself the Obsidian Anchorage." The name felt right. An anchor holding fast to the laws and memories of a forgotten age. Valerius felt a sense of wonder that momentarily eclipsed his weariness. He had a new duty now. He was no longer just a prefect, a patrol captain. He was the de facto ambassador to an ancient alien yet fundamentally human intelligence. He was the custodian of the obsidian Anchorage. His first act would be to secure the system not with warships, but with laws. He would petition the Concordance to declare the Amaranth system a protected zone, a place of study and pilgrimage, open to all who came in peace and respected the law, a place where the oldest and newest parts of humanity could meet. A mirror's purpose is to provide clarity. The civilian ships, one by one, began to jump out of the system, their captains sending messages of profound gratitude to the vigil. The Stardust Drifter was the last to leave. The little girl's face appeared on Valerius's screen, a bright, hopeful smile in the cold darkness of space. "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Prefect," she said, her voice clear and high. "Are you going to stay and be friends with the big ring?" Valerius felt a lump in his throat. "Yes," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I think I am." As her ship vanished into the swirling vortex of hyperspace, Valerius turned back to the view of the Anchorage. It was humming again, a low, steady thrum of activity, but it was no longer a mysterious, threatening sound. It was the sound of a great mind at work, the sound of a library being opened, the sound of a judge reviewing its dockets. The sigil on its surface glowed with a calm, steady light, a beacon of order in the vast, chaotic emptiness of the void. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult. There would be political battles, scientific rivalries, and more fanatics drawn to the power of the Anchorage. But for the first time in a long time, Julius Valerius felt a sense of profound optimism. They were not adrift in a meaningless universe. There were rules. There was a history. And there was a future waiting to be written in the great silent ledger of the stars. He had faced the judgment of the past, and he had been found adequate. It was enough. A ledger's final entry is a beginning. Valerius stood on his bridge, the quiet hum of his own ship, a counterpoint to the deeper resonance of the Anchorage. The initial crisis had passed, but the true work was just beginning. He had to manage the processing of the cultists, a task that required a delicate balance of law and compassion. He had to establish a formal protocol for communication with the Anchorage, a process that would likely take years of careful, patient effort. And he had to fend off the inevitable tide of political and military interest that would soon descend upon his quiet little sector. Anya Sharma stood beside him, her presence a quiet source of strength. "The first wave of Concordance ships will be here in 3 days, sir," she said. "The diplomats, the scientists, the admirals. This place is about to get very crowded." Valerius nodded, his eyes fixed on the immense obsidian ring. "Let them come," he said. "They need to see this. They need to understand what we've found." He knew that many would see the Anchorage as a weapon to be controlled, a treasure to be plundered. He had to make them see it as he did as a teacher. He felt a sense of immense responsibility, a weight far greater than the command of a single warship. He was the guardian of a legacy, the first student in a school that had been closed for millennia. The Anchorage had judged him, and in doing so, had given him a new purpose. His life was no longer about patrolling borders, but about building bridges. Bridges between the past and the future, between faith and reason, between the law and the human heart that so often struggled to obey it. He was ready. The counting never truly ends. Lyceum's voice broke the silence, a hint of something new in its synthesized tones. "Wonder, perhaps. Prefect, the Anchorage is transmitting a new data packet. It is not a legal document. It is a lesson." On the main view screen, a complex diagram of a starship's energy system appeared. It was a design far beyond anything the Concordance had ever conceived, elegant, efficient, and powerful. At the bottom of the diagram was a single line of text, translated from the ancient mathematical language of the ring. Valerius stared at the screen, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was a gesture of goodwill, a sign of trust, a partnership offered by an entity that had every right to remain aloof and judgmental. The Obsidian Anchorage was not just a judge and a library. It was a potential ally. This changed everything. The balance of power in the galaxy had just been subtly but irrevocably altered. He now possessed a gift, a piece of knowledge that would strengthen the Concordance in ways its admirals could only dream of. But it was a gift that came with a profound obligation. An obligation to use it wisely, to honor the principles of the giver. The teacher had given its student his first lesson, and Valerius knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that he would not disappoint. He would be worthy of the trust that had been placed in him. Anya Sharma's fingers flew across her console, mapping the energy signature of the gifted schematic. "Sir, the efficiency curve is..." "Impossible," she breathed, her voice a mix of reverence and disbelief. "It doesn't just block energy, it reintegrates a percentage of the kinetic impact back into the ship's power grid. It turns a punch into a sip of fuel." Valerius felt the immensity of the gesture wash over him. This was not just a thank you note. It was the opening sentence in the most important conversation in human history. He keyed the internal comms. "Medical teams report the status of the children. Engineering begin drafting a power transfer plan. I want them stable and secure before the fleet arrives." He would treat the defeated cultists with the full dignity afforded by Concordance law. The Anchorage was watching, and he would give it no cause to reconsider its judgment. His actions now would form the bedrock of their future relationship, a foundation built on shared principles. A mirror is a patient observer. In the Vigil's brightly lit medical bay, a young cultist named Ilara sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, sipping a warm, nutritional broth. Her face, scrubbed clean of the ritualistic ash she had worn for years, was pale and lost. A Concordance medic, a man with gentle eyes and a receding hairline, checked her vitals without a word of judgment. She had expected a cell, a collar, the cold fury of a conqueror. She had not expected quiet professionalism and a warm meal. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We tried to. We were your enemies." The medic finished his scan and offered her a small, tired smile. "The prefect's orders, ma'am. The law says you're non-combatants until a formal tribunal says otherwise. And the law says we render aid to anyone in distress." Ilara looked down at her hands. The Void Father had promised a fiery ascension. The Anchorage had delivered a bill, and the prefect had given her a blanket. The 3 days passed in a blur of meticulous, exhausting work. The cultist fleet was secured, their crews cared for, their ships tethered in a neat, orderly line. Valerius and his staff worked in shifts, documenting everything, preparing for the arrival of the Concordance delegation. He felt like a man preparing his home for a visit from a powerful and unpredictable landlord. He was the sole expert on a subject that was only hours old. Then they arrived. Not as a trickle, but as a flood. The ledger of power has many columns. The jump point tore open in a silent explosion of cerulean light, and the third fleet of the Concordance poured into the Amaranth system. It was a display of overwhelming force led by the super-dreadnought Ironclad Will, a mountain of gray alloy bristling with capital-grade weapon emplacements. Its commander was Admiral Kazian Kaito, a man known for his rigid adherence to doctrine and his profound distrust of the unknown. Valerius watched from his bridge, the Vigil utterly dwarfed by the newcomers, and felt a new kind of chill. Kaito's face appeared on the main viewer. He was sharp, angular, and his eyes held the cold certitude of a man who saw the universe as a problem to be solved with precise applications of force. "Prefect Valerius," he began, his voice a low baritone that tolerated no argument. You are to be commended for securing a volatile situation. Transfer all tactical data to my flagship and assume a support position. I am taking direct command of this operation." It was not a request. Valerius stood his ground, his posture unwavering. "Admiral, welcome to Amaranth. I will of course transfer all relevant data. However, I must respectfully advise you that this is not a tactical situation. It is a diplomatic one." Kaito's eyebrow arched a minute expression of immense displeasure. "Diplomacy, Prefect. With a machine I have read your preliminary report. You have found a pre-diaspora weapons platform of incalculable power. It must be secured. A teacher's value is not in its fists." Valerius met the Admiral's gaze without flinching. "With respect, Admiral, you are mistaken. It is not a weapon. It is an adjudicator. It did not destroy the cultists. It neutralized them according to a legal code we are only beginning to understand." He gestured toward the immense silent ring. "We have established a rudimentary form of communication, a relationship based on lawful precedent. Any aggressive action could undo everything." Kaito's expression hardened. "Precedent, Prefect. The only precedent that matters is concordance sovereignty. This artifact is the single greatest strategic asset in known space. We will not ask for its cooperation. We will command it." Valerius felt Lyceum's presence beside him a silent ally. He knew he was walking a razor's edge. He had to convince a warrior to think like a scholar. "That would be a grave error," Admiral Valerius stated, his voice low and firm. "The obsidian anchorage has a specific nature. You must understand that this great archive teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by callers. It responds to claims, not commands, to proof, not power." He paused, letting the words sink in. "If you try to put a leash on it, it will simply hand you a bill for the leash, and you will find you cannot afford it. A mirror reveals the folly of pride." Kaito was not a man accustomed to being contradicted. He saw Valerius not as a colleague, but as a provincial governor who had stumbled upon a gold mine and now foolishly believed he owned it. He cut the channel and turned to his own tactical officer. "That relic is broadcasting on a low-energy frequency. I want its source code. Launch a full-spectrum deep penetration scan. I want to know what's inside that ring, and I want to know now." The Vigil's bridge crew watched in horror as the ironclad Will began to power up its formidable sensor arrays. "Sir, he's ignoring your warning," Anya whispered, her hand hovering over the tactical display. Valerius could only watch a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. "All we can do now," he said grimly, "is wait for the bill to arrive." A lance of pure energy, invisible but incredibly powerful, shot from the dreadnought and slammed into the obsidian anchorage. The anchorage did not retaliate. It did not power up weapons or emit a cry of anger. It simply changed. The obsidian surface shimmered, and a shield of absolute blackness, a perfect void that reflected no light and emitted no energy, snapped into existence around it. On the bridge of the ironclad Will, every console connected to the sensor array sparked and went dead. Alarms blared, and on Kaito's personal command screen, a single elegant message appeared written in the crisp, formal script of Concordance legal documents. It was an invoice. A debt is a cage built by the debtor. The amount was staggering, a figure that dwarfed the annual military budget of an entire sector. The charge was listed as. Below the total was a second line. Kaito stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief that slowly curdled into pure fury. "Report," he roared. His weapons officer's voice was strained. "Admiral, all primary and secondary weapon systems are unresponsive. The ship's core command protocols are locked. We can move, we have shields, but we are completely disarmed. The anchorage had not attacked his ship. It had simply foreclosed on it. It had reached across the void with a whisper of code and neutered the most powerful dreadnought in the Third Fleet. The message was sent to every concordance ship in the system, including the Vigil. Anya looked at Valerius, her expression a mixture of terror and vindication. "It did exactly what you said it would do," she said. Valerius nodded, feeling no triumph, only a deep sense of foreboding. He had won the argument, but he may have lost the war. Kaito, humiliated and enraged, was now more dangerous than ever. The situation had escalated from a disagreement to a direct confrontation. The counting continues regardless of rank. Just as the internal concordance crisis reached its peak, the universe decided to complicate matters further. Without warning, a second fleet of ships tore through the jump point. They were not concordance. Their hulls were matte black, designed to absorb sensor scans, their profiles sharp and predatory. They bore the insignia of the Xylo Syndicate, a criminal organization renowned for corporate espionage and data piracy on a grand scale. They were the most sophisticated thieves in the galaxy. The Syndicate fleet ignored the Concordance vessels entirely. Their target was clear. They fanned out in a precise, practiced formation, their attention focused solely on the shielded obsidian anchorage. They were not here for a fight. They were here for a heist. On the bridge of the Vigil, Lyceum's voice was stark. "Prefect, the Syndicate is deploying viral intrusion packages. They are not using a brute force scan. They are attempting to pick the lock." Kaito, his ship still effectively a multi-trillion credit hostage, was forced to watch as a hostile fleet went to work on the prize he had just been denied. His fury was now directed at the newcomers. All ships, he broadcast his voice tight, with constrained violence, prepare for combat. "We will not allow these jackals to steal Concordance property." But Valerius knew the Syndicate's attack was a greater test for the Anchorage than Kaito's bullheaded scan had been. This was a battle of intellect, not of power. A teacher recognizes a clever cheater. The Syndicate's attack was a thing of beauty. Dozens of small, high-velocity drones attached themselves to the Anchorage's shield, not trying to breach it, but to vibrate it at a precise resonant frequency, hoping to find a flaw in the perfect defense. Simultaneously, streams of corrupted data disguised as harmless background radiation washed over the ring, seeking a port, a flaw, a single crack in the ancient code. It was a subtle, insidious assault. The Anchorage's response was not a shield or a weapon. It was an audit. A new wave of light emanated from the ring, not a blast, but a gentle, pervasive glow that washed over the Syndicate fleet. It was a counter-scan, but it wasn't looking for weaknesses. It was looking for information. On every public data network in the galaxy, from the Concordance news feeds to the shadowy financial markets of the Outer Rim, a torrent of new information suddenly appeared. It was the Xylo Syndicate's complete unencrypted accounting ledger. Every bribed official, every secret contract, every illegal transaction, every hidden bank account, every pending hostile takeover, all of it laid bare for the universe to see. The Anchorage had not attacked the pirates. It had simply made them transparent. It had turned their greatest asset, their secrecy, into their greatest liability. It was a checkmate delivered with the quiet, devastating finality of an auditor's report. A mirror exposes all hidden stains. The commander of the Syndicate flagship, a woman known only as the Broker, saw her empire crumble in a matter of seconds. Her allies would abandon her enemies would hunt her, and every government in the galaxy would have a warrant for her arrest. Her cool, professional demeanor shattered, replaced by the feral desperation of a cornered animal. Her gamble had failed. Now there was only one path left: destruction. "All ships," she snarled over her fleet's private channel, "if we cannot have the prize, no one will. Target the Concordance fleet. Target the ring. Burn it all to the ground." the sleek black ships designed for stealth and infiltration suddenly revealed their teeth. Hidden weapon ports slid open, and streams of plasma and kinetic rounds erupted from their hulls, directed not at the Anchorage, but at the disorganized and conflicted Concordance fleet. Kaito, his primary weapon still locked down, was a caged wolf. Defensive formations. Protect the civilian science vessels, he ordered, his rage now a cold, focused fury. The battle had begun, and the Concordance was on the back foot, caught between a hostile fleet and a silent, judgmental artifact. Valerius watched the first salvos cross the void. The time for diplomacy was over. Now they had to fight. A ledger demands balance even in chaos. Lyceum, implement the shield harmonics. Valerius ordered, his voice cutting through the rising tension on the bridge. Anya, divert all non-essential power to shields and engines. We're going to draw their fire. The Vigil. A mere patrol ship surged forward, placing itself between the attacking syndicate and the larger, more vulnerable science vessels of the fleet. It was a David and Goliath moment, a tiny shield against a storm of fire. The first syndicate volley slammed into the Vigil. The ship shuddered and the lights flickered, but the shields held. The new design, the gift from the Anchorage, absorbed and redistributed the energy with astonishing efficiency. A cheer went up from the bridge crew. They had a fighting chance. Valerius saw his opening a path to victory that had nothing to do with destroying the enemy. It had to do with teaching the Anchorage what a true threat looked like. Admiral Kaito, he broadcast, his voice calm and clear amidst the chaos of battle. The Anchorage responds to legal arguments. The syndicate's data theft was a civil crime. Their attack on us is a capital one. We need to prove it in a way the Anchorage will understand. We need a victim. Kaito's voice came back, strained but listening. What are you proposing, Prefect? The count is of actions, not corpses. We need to show the Anchorage a clear violation of its most fundamental principles, the protection of the innocent, Valerius explained, his mind racing. Designate one of your science vessels as a non-combatant medical transport. Have it broadcast a universal distress signal. We will protect it, but we need to lure the syndicate into firing on a designated, protected target. It's a gamble, but it's the only way to get our most powerful ally off the sidelines. There was a moment of silence from the ironclad will. Then Kaito's voice returned, stripped of its arrogance, replaced by the clipped tones of a commander making a difficult choice. Do it, he said. The plan was put into motion. A small, unarmed hydrogeological survey ship, the Pathfinder, changed its designation, its emergency lights flashing, its comm system screaming a repeating cry for medical assistance. The Vigil and two other Concordance frigates formed a protective screen around it. The syndicate, blinded by rage and desperation, took the bait. The broker, seeing the vulnerable ship, ordered her fleet to concentrate fire on it, hoping to punch a hole in the Concordance's morale. A storm of plasma torpedoes and railgun slugs converged on the tiny ship. Valerius held his breath. And then the Anchorage acted. A teacher's final lesson is of consequence. The mental voice returned, but this time it was not dispassionate. It was cold. It was the sound of a law being broken, a final line being crossed. The voice was a thunderclap in the mind of every being in the system. From the surface of the obsidian Anchorage, hundreds of impossibly thin, impossibly strong tendrils of blue light lashed out. They were not weapons of destruction. They were instruments of deconstruction. They moved with a surgeon's precision, striking every syndicate ship simultaneously. They did not cause explosions. They simply took the ships apart. Weapon systems were detached and flung into harmless orbits. Engine cores were encased in impenetrable stasis fields. Bridge modules were gently severed from their hulls, left with life support, but no control. In the space of 10 seconds, the entire pirate fleet was rendered into a floating scrapyard of perfectly preserved, perfectly helpless components. The attack was over. The silence that followed was more profound than any explosion. A mirror shows the ruin of one's own making. On the bridge of the vigil, the crew stared in stunned silence. They had witnessed a power beyond their comprehension, a force that did not need to kill to win. Valerius let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The cost of the battle was still being counted. His ship's port nacelle was venting superheated plasma, a jagged scar from a kinetic round that had bypassed the shields marred the forward viewport, and Anya was nursing a nasty burn on her arm from a console that had overloaded. They had survived, but they were wounded. A shuttle moved from the ironclad Will to the Vigil. Admiral Cato came aboard, his face grim, his uniform immaculate. He walked onto Valerius's bridge, surveyed the damage, and then looked the prefect in the eye. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hard-won respect. "Prefect Valerius," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "Your bill has been forwarded to my command. I believe we have a great deal to discuss about the future of this system." The precedent had been set in the fire of battle. The Concordance now understood. You did not command the Anchorage. You consulted it. You did not plunder its knowledge. You earned it. Valerius had won. He had protected the system, saved the fleet, and established a new paradigm for humanity's relationship with its own deep past. He had proven that the law was a more powerful weapon than any dreadnought. A ledger closes one account to open another. In the weeks that followed, the Amaranth system was transformed. Under the joint supervision of Valerius and a humbled admiral, Cato, the Amaranth Protocol was drafted and ratified by the Concordance High Council. It declared the Obsidian Anchorage a sovereign entity, a protected heritage site, and a partner in galactic law. Valerius was promoted and named the permanent liaison, the first ambassador to an entity older than his own civilization. The wreckage of the Syndicate fleet was collected, its crews tried in Concordance courts, its assets used to repay the debt Cato had incurred. The balance was restored. Valerius stood once more on the bridge of the Vigil, looking out at the great obsidian ring. It hummed its steady ancient song, a tune he now understood as the sound of thought, of memory, of law. The A-ray systems of the Anchorage, which had pulsed with defensive energy during the battle, were now cool and dark again, their surfaces once more a perfect star-dusted black. A new data packet arrived from the ring, another lesson this time on sustainable power generation. The partnership was growing. He thought about the long road that had led him here, from a tired patrol captain to the guardian of humanity's oldest legacy. The universe was still a vast, dangerous place, but it no longer felt empty or without rules. They had found a teacher, a mirror, and a judge, all wrapped in one silent, patient machine. It would not solve all their problems, but it would always remind them of their highest ideals. It would count their deeds, and in that counting, they would find their future. The deepest truths are written in the quietest ink.